Hello and welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your hosts, Buddy Sotello Esquire and Evan Ginzburg. Introduce our guest this week, Evan Ginzburg, if you please.
Absolutely. Leonard Caplan is a teacher, director, video producer, talk show host, writer, songwriter, voiceover artist, podcaster, a true Renaissance man from his palatial estate. Look at that backdrop. Leonard Caplan. How are you?
I'm great, Evan. What an introduction. It's going to make me sound like an egomaniac, but I'll live with it.
Well, look, you're an accomplished guy, and a lot of the wrestling fans know you from Wrestle Talk.
Yeah, Wrestling Talk.
Yeah, so that's one of the original shows that you had all the legends on. Tell us about the show.
Well, Wrestling Talk began in 1987, in June of 1987, and one famous sheet writer told me that I have the oldest show about wrestling. So I got the idea to do the show from Vince McMahon's TNT show. He had like a kind of a fake talk show, and I didn't start out to do a show. I just kind of evolved from that because my friend Paul Fay was a photographer, a wrestling photographer, and he had been trained by another wrestling photographer who was stepping up to become a referee, and his name was Paul Richard, and he became a WWE referee. And Paul learned photography. He got involved as a manager in the IWF, that was Killer Kowalski's federation, and Paul was the connection that led me and him to form the show. One day, I ran a cable TV studio for Warner Cable, and I needed something for my after-school club. I had teenagers in an after-school club. I need something for them to do. And I said, Paul, can you get Killer Kowalski to come to the studio? Well, maybe he said, hey, Sonny. He used to call everybody Sonny if he liked you. You were Sonny or Dickie. Sonny, you want to see Walter? You want to meet Walter, Killer Kowalski? I said, sure. So he brought him to the studio, and I ran a high school studio. By night, I used to teach adults. By day, I taught the high school kids after school. And we had Kowalski for an hour and a half. And it was set up at that point like a Johnny Carson kind of a set. I sat behind a huge desk, and Paul sat next to Killer Kowalski in the guest chairs. So we weren't really a team then. And we did this show, and we had an hour's worth of stuff. So he went home, and we said, well, what are we going to do with this? How are we going to show it? So that became the basis for the first 5 episodes, 15 minutes at a time. We filled it up with the other 15 minutes with other guests, such as Paul Richard himself, who got Paul Fay into wrestling. And it just grew from there. And Paul and I became sort of a comedy team on the show, because neither one of us now, here's a misconception that people, longtime watchers of the show, have thought that Paul and I were, or especially me, was a wrestling expert. I was never a wrestling expert with statistics or anything like that. So that comes a little later. So by default, Paul and I became a comedy team on the show. So Paul would come in with an outrageous costume, and I would make fun of him. I was the straight man. And we would interview the guests. And a fan of the show, Paul met in person, a 14-year-old kid, 16-year-old kid. He became my supplier of information when Paul invited him to the studio. He kept coming and coming and coming. Ultimately, when Paul passed away, Ed Whittier was his name. As he grew older, he became my co-host. And he was always the source of any real deep information about what happened in what match and who won what championship and what year and all that stuff. So in the Paul Fay years, from 1987 to 1991, unfortunately when he passed away, Wrestling Talk was a mixture of entertainment, comedy, wrestling questions, and it was a free for all, and we did angles on the show with Paul getting beat up and me taking one body slam, only one.
Yeah. Who gave it to you?
His name was Chris Duffy from the IWF. He went under Cowboy Chris Duffy and then later Gorgeous Chris Duffy. A great, great guy who died before his time. Very young kid. He was so talented. He made a great bad guy. We had a feud on the show, he and I. And during a live call-in, we went to a commercial, and we still had a caller on the line, and the caller said, "Hey, why don't you slam him?" Because he and I were going back and forth. So then Chris said to me when we hung up with the caller, "Do you want to get slammed?" I go, "Well, will it hurt?" And he said, "No." He goes, "I promise it won't hurt." So when we came back, I insulted him some more, and he gave me the body slam, and the professional that he was, I did not feel a thing. It was amazing. Even when he picked me up over his head, I didn't feel it, and it looked real, and it was a lot of fun. I don't think I would do it again. I don't think I'd trust anybody else to have done that to me again. By 1991, after Paul passed away, and with the steroid scandal, Ed and I, by that time, that young boy who then filled in for Paul when Paul passed away, we kind of said to ourselves, the angles were fun. Ed did some too. He took some bumps. Maybe we shouldn't do the angles anymore because it's kind of not believable anymore on this level of a TV show. So that's from then on, we kind of became more serious about what we were talking about, and pretty much it was like a Siskel and Ebert kind of a thing.
So let me throw this out to both you guys. There's a zillion podcasts and wrestling shows out there, and when I hear them doing with great gravitas, Raw, SmackDown, AEW, pay-per-view reviews, my eyes are rolling in my head. What is the balance on these shows between what do you think is the ideal balance? I'm asking both you guys, as far as being entertaining, covering the sport, but without it being the same show 1,000 times. Because that's what I'm getting out of a lot of these podcasts.
Yeah, well, it's a lot like sports, I mean, you have a lot of sports podcasts where people are saying the same things about sports over and over again, and analyzing the same teams over in different ways. I guess the one nice thing about, podcasts is that there is such a wide selection that you don't have to just listen to one standard thing. You have a choice of a program that's like this one. Now, the only problem is there's so many programs out there that, being able to get a lot of ratings for one particular program, unless you pay for advertising and have big names on, is hard to do. We don't get clicks by the millions. We're lucky to get clicks by the hundreds if we can even get that. So it's there's so much fragmentation in the market, but the one positive thing is that there are chances for a show like this that doesn't have any agenda that's like what you're talking about survive in a market like this.
One thing I've never liked in the other talk shows about wrestling is that sometimes, many times, the hosts would try to be wrestling characters themselves, and they come off looking really, really foolish. And I think that's what separated my show and your show, Evan, that we were always ourselves. You know what I mean? It may be a slight exaggeration of ourselves, but we never gave ourselves these names like the Crippler or whatever, and become these over the top crazy people. Another mistake I think that some of the other shows do is they get caught up in the minutia. They'll know every move of every hold of every moment in the match, and that's boring. That's boring as hell.
And obsessive.
It is obsessive. The personalities are the important thing, and the believability. I stress believability in everything I try to do. I consider myself a writer. I have not published as of yet, but in the scripts that I write, in the stories that I write, believability is the king. Character is the king. If you can believe a character, and that is especially true in wrestling, then you've got something really valuable. And people forget that, and that's where they go wrong, my opinion.
You have to care. You have to care about the characters, whether it's a movie, TV show, boxing match, wrestling match. If you don't care, it's meaningless.
And I've always felt that to make somebody care, it takes premise.
Yeah.
Premise leads you to care about something. If you have a ridiculous premise,
That's
people will not buy into it. And when you're doing things that, like, you know, are the Bobby Lashley wedding type thing, where it's not fun to watch. It's like a torture, as Evan has said, a punishment for sins past, long past. He definitely has, you know, a point when Evan says that, you know, it's if it becomes laborious to watch something, you're not going to watch it. You're going to go on to something else. And right now it is very difficult, I find, to dissect wrestling when it isn't the kind of stuff that we knew entertained us for so many years.
I am in total agreement. I think we have the same philosophy, buddy.
Yeah. In fact, I wanted to know where your love of wrestling came from. Where's the origin of it from in your life?
My grandparents introduced me to wrestling when I would visit them in northern Vermont, and they could get the Canadian stations. All of a sudden, I would see Andre the Giant as Andre Roussimoff.
Wow.
And be acquainted with wrestlers like Edouard Carpentier and Dino Bravo before he was in the WWE, and Gino Brito, and Mad Dog Vachon, my grandmother's favorite wrestler. And years later, I got to interview Butcher Paul Vachon, which was a thrill for me. That was at one of those fan fests that we're familiar with, Evan. And I did develop a love for it then, because back then it was theatrical, but it had that deep down believability. And the heart of it then was Bruno Sammartino. Bruno Sammartino had more believability than any wrestler in my memory. I don't go back too much beyond Bruno, but when you saw Bruno, you could tell the fans believed it, the announcers almost believed it, and that made you believe it when you watched Bruno in any contest. And that filtered down the card. If he was at the top of the card, you had to take all the other matches seriously, like George the Animal Steel, Spiros Arion with his feud with Chief Jay Strongbow. I used to have the hair, and I used to imitate Spiros Arion going like this and making his hair move. I used to be able to do that. That was one of my first imitations. I do characters and voices and stuff like that, but unfortunately, unless I have a wig, I can't do that anymore.
do some voices for us.
Look at me when I'm talking to you. That's Andre. And a friend of mine and I would do the Andre and Jimmy Fly show. So, hey, brother, I'm listening to you. I see you out in TV Wonderland. And of course, I kind of embarrassed myself on this one, but I could not resist. I interviewed Leaping Lanny Poffo, the genius. So at the end of the interview, he did a little bit of his brother's imitation, and then I went into, oh yeah, it's gonna happen. You're gonna watch the show next week. Dig it, you know.
And you got the hand gestures down.
I just didn't even think about it that time when I did it that time. But what a nice guy he was, Lanny Poffo. A lot of these times when I interview people from the WWE, like Lanny Poffo and Tugboat, and especially Mario Mancini, they have such stories and great moments that the WWE, when you watch them in the context of WWE, and they don't give them the time or the opportunity to really show who they really are, when you see them in person outside the WWE, you think, damn it, what a waste. They could have used him. They could have done so much more with this guy. He knows so much. He's
well,
got
especially in this time of COVID right now, that's one thing that Evan has brought up on a number of occasions. You know, it would be a great opportunity for the WWE, especially in this non-kayfabe era that we have, to do some real profiles and really show the colors behind the people that they put out to wrestle. And they have a good opportunity to do that, but they're not doing that. They're giving the same old shtick and 20-minute, Triple H promos or Stephanie McMahon or Shane McMahon or Baron Corbin or something, or The Miz, or fill in the blank.
Once some company, and WWE is no different, once they become a large corporation, they lose their soul. That's a cliche, but they lose their soul. They lose what made them great in the first place because of their size, because of the money. The bottom line becomes too important for them, and
not offending the sponsors, etc.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very sad when you remember how they started. Just mesmerizing stuff. Some great matches.
So tell me a little bit more about your voiceover work and what you've done, what your catalog is, and how you get ready for one of those roles. Do you look at pictures of the person or the item that you're the character that you're giving a voiceover for, and then envision the voice, or how does that work?
Well, my voiceovers tend to be original characters that I make up, which saves me from lawsuits.
Yeah.
Did you know that it's illegal to have a demo? You know what a demo is? Online, and have the SpongeBob cast or Mickey Mouse or Bugs Bunny, because those are all copyrighted characters. So they tell you when you're in the voiceover business, you have to have some original characters. I happen to have original characters anyway. One of them I invented for the show, and it's hard for me to do it because I wear a costume. I'll have to hide myself to do this one. You ready? You ready for this one? I'm gonna go off camera if you can still hear me.
Okay.
All right. All right. Welcome to the studio, man unknown from parts unknown.
This is man unknown from parts unknown, you cretin. I should have been introduced first because I am the superstar here, and you should not be talking about anyone else.
So that
one part Wolfman Jack, one part Lou Albano.
No, actually, have you ever seen, let's see, the movie The Robe?
No, I've not.
Or Demetrius and the Gladiators. So there was an actor named Jay Robinson, and that's partly him, and the other one is Claude Rains. I'm sure you know who Claude Rains is. So
Visible Man.
Combination, but that's, if I heard that, it's kind of an affected kind of a voice. You know what I mean?
But is that something that you do? You hear voices, then say, I want to combine this voice with that voice to equal a character? Or what's the process there for you?
It's just all imagination. It stems from me retaining my childhood imagination. When I was a kid, I had an audio cassette recorder. Now, most kids, when they got a tape recorder, they would use it for music, to listen to music. That was the equivalent of iPhones and iPods of today. But I saw this thing, I don't want music on here. I got music on records. I want to do skits. And I used to make fun of people in my neighborhood for my other friends. And I did all my neighbors. And I just would picture them in my head, kind of close my eyes, and there they would be, like my neighbor down the street used to chase me away from his house. You don't touch my daughter. Get off my lawn. Like that. You know what I mean? And just, I had some crazy neighbors. But there's no scientific process really to doing it. It's just something that I've always done. And I've been lucky enough to get paid for a few of them.
That's wonderful. No, it's good. I like to know what motivates people to do the things that they do, and how it then finds its way into what you loved in wrestling also.
I'll tell you, my first imitation was of my grandfather. So I was a little kid, And my mother and my grandmother would say, "What does your grandfather say about this? How does he think about the garden?" And I would say, and I'm like 4 or something, and I'd say, I just like to see it grow. We're not going to get anything out of it. It was mostly the attitude there of this little kid saying that stuff. If you can picture me as a little kid, imitating my grandfather's attitude, making my mother and my grandmother laugh because they recognized the attitude. It kind of spurred me on, and then making my friends laugh with the neighbors. And I just kept going, A lot of fun.
So, Leonard, who are some of your favorite interviews? Any magic moments that come to mind?
Well, my interview with Bruno Sammartino was fantastic. We spent the day with him. Paul Fay, my original co-host, actually put money into the show to fly some of these people in.
Wow.
And our goal back then was to make it to broadcast TV, which we did. We were on Channel 27 in Worcester, Mass, before it was a Hispanic station. We were on like at 1 a.m. We had a live audience for the Bruno show. We normally would have live call-in, but we had a live in-studio audience. We had a fan club at that point of about 500 people, and we had a drawing, and the people came in. And Bruno Sammartino, unbelievable. We took him out to my favorite restaurant, the Hilltop, which is now sadly gone for a few years. And somebody sent him over a drink, and he wanted to meet the person who sent him the drink, but the person wouldn't show themselves. So Bruno says, if he's not going to come out, I'm not going to accept the drink. You know what I mean? So we had great conversations with Bruno. Don Morocco we had on the show. Definitely a magic moment. And the Fabulous Moolah, we found out from the Fabulous Moolah that she almost married the musician Hank Williams.
Wow. Wow.
She knew that. She revealed that on our show. And of course, my friend for 30 odd years, Medusa, we met on my show. And I talk to her practically every day, and we've done projects together, and I've been on her podcast. And
you should have married Medusa. Moolah almost married Hank Williams. Yeah.
I could not keep up with Medusa's lifestyle, trust me. But and Rob Van Dam has always been a real great favorite of mine, and I got to interview him. Brett the Hitman Hart, we were very lucky to get him, and Toru Tanaka.
Wow.
And just real, Johnny Rods was a great guy. I would run into him on occasion. Through Wrestling Talk, we had done some videotaping of some independent shows. So I would borrow the van from the cable company I worked for and get a crew of former students or volunteer adults. And one time we went all the way up to Stowe, Vermont, and we set up 4 cameras outside the ring. And we were affiliated with this little, and at the time, and Axe worked for them, and I got to know him for a while. And of course, Jimmy Superfly Snuka, he was everywhere on the independents. And we recorded the crowd noise, and then later we would come back to the studio and edit them and do our own commentary too. And that was a lot of fun. I realized how difficult hold by hold or play by play wrestling is really. It's no game. Some of those videos are actually on YouTube. Some of them aren't bad.
I've tried to do play-by-play a number of times for some wrestling feds, and when I was doing commentary, I was the color guy with my friend who's the play-by-play. But then there was a time he wasn't able to make it, so I had to do both play-by-play and color, by myself, and that was a lot more awkward than. Have you ever tried to do that, Evan?
Yeah.
I've done play-by-play, but honestly, I don't remember the names of like 80% of the holds. So I'm just winging it. What a move! What a move!
Well, you have to be letter perfect if you were doing it for like WCW or WWE. It was hard enough on the independents. And I got to ring announce one time. I got to announce King Kong Bundy coming into the ring, which was a thrill. And I'll tell you.
How did you get to do that? How was that set up?
Well, there was, in my hometown, Revere here, there was a small federation, the CWF, which later became NWA New England before the promoter, Tony Rumble, died. Tony was a friend of mine, and he said, would you like to announce King Kong Bundy to come in the ring? Would you like to be the ring announcer tonight? So actually, I did it twice. I did it once as myself, and I did it once as Man Unknown from Parts Unknown, the character that I did for you earlier. And that was tough because in that costume, I couldn't really see. So I'm like kind of a blind man walking around in the ring. So I have this little card, and I just, you know, did it as theatrically as possible. Let me tell you the scariest.
Leonard, tell us about Tony Rumble, because he's been gone quite a while now, but everybody speaks so highly of him.
Yeah. Nobody knows who he is on the West, so.
Tony Rumble was a local wrestler. He lived in my hometown, Revere, and he was trained by Kowalski, I think. I can't remember. Anyway, he had the moniker the Boston Bad Boy. So there was another wrestler at the time. They were the Boston Bad Boys. It was a tag team. I won't mention this wrestler's name, but they had a legitimate shoot feud for years and years over that name. And I never had him on the show because I was a friend of Tony's, you know. Right. And Tony said to me one time, he says, your show is so popular. He said, I think I can promote wrestling here. So he said that because of my show, that's why he was successful. He knew he had a test audience, the audience that was on my show. He would come on our show as Tony Rumble, but he also did another character, the Dungeon Master, the one and only Dungeon Master. And when he put that costume on, he was as scary as anything you could hear. Oh my God. He actually got me suspended from doing wrestling talk by my boss at the cable company because he came and he destroyed everything in the studio, broke all the mics.
Wow.
I had this great poster of Elizabeth in the background. He tore it up.
Wow.
And it was just, you know, that moment made it onto Entertainment Tonight as
really?
Wow.
Yeah, back in the day. It's so crazy.
Do you have any of this stuff like put up on YouTube or a website or anything like that?
If you go to Leonard Aaron, LeonardAaron, that's the Wrestling Talk channel.
I'm gonna have to check this out. We rescheduled you from another guest, so I didn't have a chance to do a lot of research on you this week, and I definitely like to check out some of the things that you're talking about. They sound fascinating.
Well, thank you, buddy. I appreciate that. But let me tell you the scariest moment that I had on the show. It was on location, and I wanted to interview Jake the Snake. So I introduced myself to Jake the Snake. A couple of years before that, I had worked with Jake the Snake's father on a tribute wrestling show to my late co-host, Paul Fay. And he was going to be the ring announcer. And I mentioned how nice his father was to me to break the ice. So he went off. He slapped his knee, you know, like somebody will slap their knee. He goes, I hate my father. And I thought he was going to hit me. I really did. You know what he did? He had a defanged snake. And I had this woolly sweater on. He sicked this. I didn't know it was defanged at the time, or it had no fangs. He sicked the snake on me, and the snake grabbed my arm and my. Thinking, what the hell is going on here? So later on in the night, that was before the interview. So I said. So Ed says to me, "Well, I guess you're not going to get that interview." I said, you know what? I'm going to try it again later. I tried it again later, and he actually talked to me like a normal human being. This is at the time he was doing substance abuse, so he was a loose cannon. It was just crazy, crazy, crazy.
Wow.
So looking back on that, you know, what do they call those moments that you misremember? There's a name for it. It's a syndrome. Like everybody thinks that Cary Grant said Judy, Judy, Judy. but he never said it.
Hmm.
You know,
when you say it to yourself so many times, you think that it happened anyway, even
the something effect. The listeners will probably know. So I said to Ed about 10 years later, we should show that. I can't wait to see that clip again of Jake the Snake. I haven't watched it in years. So we're both looking for the moment where the snake bit my sweater, and we watched it. It never happened. And then we remembered it wasn't during the taping. It was when I was asking him the first time, and Ed was watching. A whole bunch of other people were watching live when it happened, but it was never recorded.
Leonard, it's the Mandela effect.
That's it. The Mandela effect.
A little bit of quick research, Googling, but is the like a Mandela, like not like Nelson Mandela, but like the Hindu or the Buddhist Mandela.
I think there was an incident with Nelson Mandela because a lot of people thought Nelson Mandela was dead, and he wasn't. And people swear that they remember the day he died, but he hadn't died at that point. That's why they started calling it the Mandela effect.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. So now you won't be up at like 2 a.m. going, "Oh, that's it." I should have remembered.
I
get those a lot at my age these days.
Leonard, did you ever consider you have all this footage and it's a lot of these guys are gone now, including people you've worked with on the show.
Yeah.
Maybe it would make for an interesting documentary looking back at all of this.
Well, somebody, and I don't want to say publicly now, but somebody has approached me. A friend of mine, her husband works for a big company, and he approached me. We did some preliminary interviews, and he's taking it to his boss, and they want to do a story about how our show came about and all that stuff, and what's the reason that I keep doing it, that I kept doing it. Actually, you're my most recent guest, Evan. You actually kept the show going for me last week.
Right.
Because we haven't done a show, a new one, aside from interviews on location at FanFest in Providence for a year, at least a year. And the reason for that was just the product that what Evan and I talk about all the time is the WWE product. We just can't get excited about it anymore.
I can't even watch it.
I mean, I can't watch it anymore either.
I do watch AEW, but the WWE product, it just is insulting to watch, and again, laborious is more the term than it is enjoyable. And wrestling was supposed to be something that, especially for me growing up, it was something that, because wrestling was rare and it was hard to find, you had to really work to find it on TV. I mean, Tuesday Night Titans was one of the things, even though it was silly and it was cheesy, you would watch it because you're like, you know what? It would it's the closest thing to getting a wrestling fix that you could get. And B, they'd show one good match per night, right?
I agree.
The TNT thing, they would set up, they would just have like one match that they would show, like in like 4 parts or whatever, but they'd show just one match. And I was so dying to watch anything wrestling related that I would just say, I'll take it, and I usually would tape like just those 15-minute segments so I'd have one entire match, to work with. And so the rarity of wrestling, the fact that it was something you had to sort of work to find, rather than now when it's become a staple and you have it on Fox, you have it on, a pay-per-view every couple months. A pay-per-view was a big deal, right? I mean, a WrestleMania was your first one, and everything built up to that. And then, WrestleMania 2, which I was actually at personally, there was a big build-up for. You believed it. But then when you add in the SummerSlams and the Survivor Series and the Royal Rumbles and the King of the Rings and then, Hell in the Cell, and then, the last one was friggin' they had the horror show, and then I was saying, what's the next idea going to be? Dumpster fire? because
Yeah.
that's pretty much what we're getting. The pay-per-views have gone from being something you really treasure to watch to being something you're like, oh my God, it's going to all be shown tomorrow on Raw and Thursday on SmackDown or Friday on SmackDown. So yeah.
It's like what I said before, when they get to be a big corporation, the money gets bigger, everything gets bigger, they get overexposed, they get greedy because the longer they're on, the more commercial time they can sell. So they lose the specialness of it.
Well, and speaking of greedy, and this has been sort of a thing that Evan and I have talked about for, the last couple of months, especially with the death of Kamala. There were so many, and you worked with so many of those talents that were the building blocks to make the WWE the mega corporation it is today. But so many of them have died penniless, or that they've had to, work in a warehouse somewhere or whatever. And it hasn't been a golden parachute for them, or, even one made out of tinfoil for that matter. They were just pushed out the door and said, there you go. And for some people, that can lead to some real tragic results. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, wrestling is not the wrestling that we grew up with, that's for sure. Number one, they don't sell their moves anymore. Everything's high spots. I mean, you hear that talked about constantly on different podcasts. And they don't think long term. They don't build the stars of tomorrow anymore. They just bank on maybe 3 or 4 top tier guys, and they use them until they're burned out. And it's, and some of the stunts are pretty dangerous that they do. And I don't know. It doesn't look good. AEW kind of gave me hope when they came along, and if they had come along a year earlier, we might have held on to Wrestling Talk as a monthly show a little bit longer. But even AEW is missing something, and that something is I don't think they know how to brand their guys too well, meaning that when you watch them, there aren't too many, aside from former WWE people, that are quickly identifiable instantly, to the crowd. You got to catch people with the right name, the right costume, the right gimmick, and it's just not. They're not doing it. Everybody is not. They're not growing, in my opinion. I'm sure a lot of people would disagree.
I like AEW, but I think Phoenix and Pentagon and the Young Bucks, I think they're tremendous. But again, without much of a crowd there, it's just missing something. It feels sterile.
Yeah, well, that's the COVID. That's a whole other thing. Is
Yeah.
killing everything, not just wrestling.
But he's been trapped in his house between the COVID, the fires,
Unfortunately, no riots in our neighborhood, but
They're
that's
going to send the riots to you for the trifecta.
I know. I went camping and a bunch of bears ran around my campground. And then, my campground was struck by lightning right after we left.
So, Buddy, let's tally this up. Buddy's 2020 was COVID, fires, bears, lightning.
You forgot, Evan. You forgot.
He broke his shoulder.
I fell and I broke my shoulder too. So yeah, I've had a whole lot of fun. And I had a friend out in New York, a longtime family friend in New York, died from COVID. So it's been terrible.
Big year.
Are you from Northern California, buddy? Or
yes.
South?
Yeah, I'm near San Francisco.
Yeah, so is my cousin. Yeah, I have a cousin up there.
Where's your cousin at?
Sonoma.
Oh yeah. He's dealing with the same terrible air that we are, and it's brutal out here. We've had a pollution index for about a whole month where it's been worse than Beijing. It's worse than Delhi, New Delhi, India. It's worse than Bangladesh. It's worse than you name it. Novato itself, where I'm broadcasting from, Novato itself, actually for 24 hours. Had the worst air quality in the entire United States of America. It was just we're getting all the smoke from all the different areas. We're concentrating in just our one spot, and our air quality
We're
index.
number one. We're
Yeah,
number
it
one.
was like 8 times what a normal pollution index should be, and
Sure.
it's been rough.
Climate change, let me tell you.
Yeah, no, it's
Leonard, Buddy is 23 years old. This year's been rough on him.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
23 would be nice. In fact, I would like to think that I have a lot more on the other end to look forward to, but the years do catch up to you when they're like this. But the last summer was rough, but this summer has been even rougher. And I, it's, as we were pointing out, it has changed a lot of the industries. Where do you think do you think there is a future for large crowds back again to watch wrestling?
Oh, I'm sure. I think what's going to happen is once this COVID is over, there'll be a rush on any event, and anybody will go to anything. I think for a couple of months, just for the novelty of being able to go out and not social distancing with no masks. That will be amazing for everybody. As to what happens after those first few months, who knows?
Yeah, that's a pretty.
I'll tell you, the first concert I go to after this is all over, it's going to be emotional. I miss concerts more than anything. I usually do 25, 30 shows every summer.
Wow.
Yeah, man, it's been quite a year. Quite a year.
I haven't socialized with anybody in person since February.
And I haven't gone swimming all summer long, which is something that is a major part of my exercise routine. It's but I can't even go for a walk in this kind of weather.
I miss my parasitic entourage. I'm like I just miss them. Yeah.
So yeah,
each other.
No, it has been a tough year. I mean, I'm not trying to make this a sob story hour for our listeners, but that's sort of been the one universal thing that we've been taught. Well, of course, we put this whole thing together because Evan was so caught up in everything when COVID started. He didn't have anywhere to go or anything to do anyway. So
we were losing 800 people a day in New York a couple of months ago. I've had 19 friends with COVID. 3 hospitalized, 1 intubated, 1 dead. So it's no joke. But Buddy and I do this show just so we can see another human being's face. That's
true.
That's why we do this.
I get it. Now, did you and Buddy meet because of COVID? How did you meet each other?
No, we go all the way back to being Mike Lano brought me on to Evan's show as a guest. I know Mike Lano as long as I've been involved in wrestling, going back 20 years.
Buddy was a heel manager.
I just met him at the last Fan Fest that I attended in 2019. I did an interview with him. Very nice guy.
Yeah, he's been on the show, and he's West Coast, and he did a lot of photography for All Pro Wrestling, and I would hang out with him at All Pro Wrestling. We became friends since then. We also are big fans of this one radio show called the Don and Mike Show, and we talked about that for a long time, and it took me around as his photographer for a Wrestle Fan Fest that was a complete disaster in 2007. So that we have those bonding experiences together, and Lano's been a guest on this show too. So you might, when you have a chance, check out our archives and listen to his interview here. But so like, what about for you? What things do you have planned for your future, and how are you going to be involved in wrestling?
Well, I'm thinking of taking my library of wrestling talk shows and trying to market them as historical material about wrestling, which they are.
Yeah.
And of course, that would involve taking down most of my catalog from YouTube, because if I'm selling them, why would I put them on for free on YouTube? So I'm kind of learning the process of social media marketing right now in anticipation of that. I mean, I know how to convert my DVDs into video files. That's easy. but I got to figure out how, when somebody buys, how they're distributed. How do you do that without having to do it manually? Because if I get like 100 buys, I don't want to be clicking 100 times. You know what I mean? I'm sure there's something in place for when people sell videos that way. And Wrestling Talk probably will continue in some form. Evan kind of broke the ice with the podcasting. That was the first Wrestling Talk podcast, so Evan has made history with me in that regard. And I have another show it's unrelated to wrestling. It's called What Do You Want to Do? And Evan was a guest of mine. And the purpose of that show is to show how people can work in the arts and be in the arts without doing the arts as a career, and how they can stay in, or if they have a day job, they don't have to quit playing their guitar. They don't have to quit singing. They don't have to quit doing the stand-up comedy, and they can do it on the side. They don't have to make $1 million.
Leonard, what do you think of the public shaming of actors who have been out of work and they get a day job, and next thing you know, they're on social media, this guy's working down at the supermarket or whatnot, or the department store, and they kind of shame them because their fans from 20 years ago perceive them as stars, but they still have to support their family and pay the bills. What's your take on that?
It's terrible. I think in this era of political polarization and rudeness, without mentioning any names, which would start a whole other war, people have to be re-educated on etiquette. Online etiquette does not exist. When we went online way too fast. That's my opinion. When technology happens, sometimes society is not ready for technology. So when the internet came along, when instantaneous communication like Twitter came along, you get the result that we have with nobody has any boundaries, either self-boundaries or imposed boundaries from without. People have to be retaught and reminded by, I think, responsible podcasters or hosts how to be.
Leonard, I respect you to the highest degree, but I think human nature has shown you could have technology around for 1,000 years, and people will still act like boors, and probably 10,000 years, people will still act like.
So you're a little younger than me, so I can remember when I was growing up and up until my teens and even my early 20s that on television and radio, you would not hear a swear, you would not have public shaming, you would not have any of that stuff. I mean, of course, it always existed. I know what you're getting at, buddy. It always existed, but it wasn't publicly condoned or accepted.
No, the floodgates have really gone down. That's why I'm saying in 100 years, we're probably going to be even worse. When we have technology around for 100 years, it'll probably be, we'll go back and say, do you remember when all they did was swear online? We didn't at least have, porn 24 hours a day on every channel.
I'll tell you how far we have fallen, okay? My mother lives with me here. She tells me that when Roosevelt was president, during his whole first term, hardly anybody knew he was in a wheelchair. Because the reporters had the courtesy to respect his privacy, and they never showed him from the waist down on the newsreels, and they never talked about it on the radio. That's unimaginable. Even, as I was growing up, they were starting to come out of the woodwork with a scoop at any price. Think
of how John F. Kennedy would have gotten coverage now, if
Oh, exactly. I mean, nobody knew all those scandals, that they talk about now. Of course, a lot of that came out because people always write about the assassination, and they include his whole life in the books. So, the stuff with Marilyn Monroe. Once they found out, again, the money-making devil. Once people find out they can make money on something, all bets are off. Everything's out the window. We can make millions if we're showing gossip. I mean, that's why all these books about Trump are selling so well because people want to hear the dirt, you know?
Now, I have one other question that I really wanted to ask you, and one I was thinking about earlier today, which was that why do you like talking to wrestlers? Why, in fact, why do we, you and I, Evan, and why do people like interviewing wrestlers?
They're colorful, charismatic, eclectic.
Yeah, that's, and to be quite honest, I don't like it as much as I used to, because today's wrestlers, as skilled as they are individually, they don't have that aura to me, because I'm older than them now, and I can't look up to them anymore. I can't look up to somebody that was a kid. It's the same thing with baseball players, football players. They're all kids to me now, So I don't know, I still look up to the ones that I admired on the way up, you know what I mean, throughout the years.
But I'll tell you, Leonard, I go to indie shows, and I even perform on indie shows as a heel manager on occasion. And I could pick out one guy out of 30 in the locker room and go, this kid's going to make it. He's got charisma. He's got something special. And next thing you know, the kid's working Japan. The kid's being tried out in WWE. So, you can't manufacture charisma.
No.
It's either there or it's not. And some have it and some don't.
I'll give you an example of what I mean. So it didn't really come out right. I don't mean to denigrate this crop of wrestlers. They're very talented. But you got somebody like Harley Race. Okay. Yeah. I was lucky enough to interview him for the end of his life.
Yeah, me too.
And you got people like J.J. Dillon. Okay. And you compare them to some of those big guys. They look kind of the same, but they're not. They don't have that credibility, that aura, that believability that they really were what they are portraying.
But you can walk up to the first 5,000 wrestlers and not going to be Harley Race. He's once in a lifetime.
I'm trying to think of one in particular in WWE, and I painted myself into a corner. And he's very big right now.
Baron Corbin.
Braun Strowman.
Okay.
Compare Braun Strowman to a Harley Race.
You can't.
You can't.
Oh.
It's just not that. It doesn't seem as interesting to be interviewing Braun Strowman compared to Harley Race.
Well, the other thing is society's idea of beauty changes over time. So, for example, in the 1800s, the women were chubbier. Look at the famous pictures, paintings, and which evolved over time to, be razor thin, like Twiggy. Yeah. So with the wrestlers, what I'm finding is these guys have the 6-pack of abs, because Vince likes that, and they all start to look the same. Or the opposite extreme, you got the big guys with the shaved head, giant beard, same tribal tattoos, and they start to look the same. Yeah. So, Harley Race looked like Harley Race. You go, that guy's a killer, know?
Right.
Yeah.
Or even like Kowalski, Killer Kowalski.
Nobody looked like Kowalski.
Nobody did.
Except for maybe Fred Gwynn.
Another thing is, kayfabe has not been around since 1991 originally, I guess, is when it kind of broke.
McMahon killed kayfabe.
There was an article about The Undertaker, who just retired, and they did a little mini documentary that I saw part of, and he never broke kayfabe, and he all of a sudden did for this documentary, and that's really what kept him having a mystique. That's the word, mystique. There's nobody with a mystique anymore, because partially the internet makes it impossible for anybody to have a mystique. You can't even surprise the crowd by somebody appearing on a card because it'll leak out on Twitter, And every wrestler is on Twitter, breaking character all the time.
I think Pentagon and AEW has a mystique with the mask and the, that guy's got charisma.
I've never seen him.
Oh, wow. The best indie match I've seen in 25 years was Pentagon against Phoenix. They had it in a small arena in Queens, and the audience was like 90% Hispanic. They were throwing money in the ring in tribute to them after the match. I've never seen that except at African music shows where they would throw money on stage for the musicians. They were throwing bills into the ring. It was wild. That's how
very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So maybe that's where, hopefully that sort of thing can inspire people to bring back at least wrestling as a viable live performance. And who knows, we have to reset at the top. I think there's a lot of people that wouldn't be upset if the WWE went away tomorrow. There's obviously mega fanboys, but I think the majority of wrestling fans right now wouldn't mind to see just a complete revolution as far as like where the WWE is concerned.
If I never see Randy Orton again, it'll be too soon.
You sound like Ed Whittier, my co-host. He always used to say that.
Needless to say, Randy Orton is not going to be a guest on our show anytime. Anyway, we're almost at the end of the hour. I'd like for you to re-promote your website as long as it's still got content on there that you want people to check out and how they can get a hold of you.
Anything you want to plug.
Yes.
My YouTube site is Leonard Aaron, Leonard Aaron, and you'll have some wrestling talk shows between 1987 and 2018, I guess, or 19, and some even more recent, maybe. And my other podcast where I talk about the arts and how people of all ages should never give up what their passion is. It's called What Do You Want to Do? I'm not releasing it yet. I'm going to release it when I have at least 10 guests, and I can release one every week. Because I know that's one of the formulas for success and building an audience is being able to release it every week. And I'm a teacher and I'm very busy, so I don't want to have the pressure of having to produce a new show every week while I'm teaching. So I'm building it up.
We do it to keep ourselves from going crazy. We do it every week just to make sure that we're still alive each week. Check in on each other. So
between the fires, the COVID, the monsters, he's trapped in that house.
Yes. No.
Gee, I hope nothing happens to your house, buddy.
Oh yeah, the house is least of my problems. I'm a renter. It's more me and my kids and my wife. We can just all keep from going The Shining on each other.
Yeah.
Wow. It looks very nice over there.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you so much for being our guest. And if you need a guest on your show, I'm always available. And we look forward to seeing our audience again next week. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Leonard.
All right. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.